Hello and welcome back to the Dividend Wave. Today we will be looking at Broadcom and the full year 21 earnings and having a look at the 14% dividend increase that the company is rewarding its shareholders with. So a quick look at the latest earnings. Q4 revenue came in 15% higher than the same quarter a year ago, and net income and EPS came in 50% higher than the same quarter a year ago. Turning to full year 21 that just closed, we see that net revenue is as well 15% higher than fiscal year 20, and net income and diluted EPS are actually doubling. If we look at fiscal year 21 revenue by segment, we see that the most important is Semiconductor Solutions, which grew 18% for fiscal year 21, and Infrastructure Software is actually 26% of total sales, and it grew for fiscal year 21 7%. So now just a quick look at what I consider to be Broadcom's biggest strength, which is this diversified semiconductor and software company. As we've seen, Semiconductor Solutions is 74%, and within Semiconductor Solutions, the biggest weight goes to wireless and networking. So these two make 30% plus each of the Semiconductor Solution segment. In addition to Semiconductor, we have Infrastructure Software with also a wide range of product offering. So just turning to some additional financial data. Net revenue, as we've seen, we are 15% up for fiscal year 21 versus a year ago. Gross margin was up 100 basis points, so it stands now at fairly incredible 74.5%, and adjusted EBITDA was up 21%, while free cash flow was actually up in line with revenue, and that was plus 15%. Now looking at these gross margins, which are very high, they are indeed Broadcom's profit, but they are somebody else's cost. And here lies probably one of Broadcom's threats. We've seen recently that Apple is assembling a new team to bring wireless chips design in-house. And actually Apple is quite relevant as it accounts for roughly 20% of Broadcom's revenue during the last fiscal year. But looking quickly back at this positive aspect of having these two diversified reportable segments, what we see is that for fiscal year 20, the company actually grew on the back of the Symantec acquisition, so software. And what we see is that actually for fiscal year 20, the Semiconductor Solutions was actually declining in terms of revenue year on year. We see that effect for the first 3 quarters with a slight recovery in quarter 4. And now with fiscal year 21 complete, what we actually see is that this year that closed, Semiconductor Solutions were actually the driving force with growth in the upper teens, so very healthy here, while for this year, the Infrastructure Software was actually only at middle digit growth. What we see now is that for fiscal year 22, although we don't get full guidance for the company, they have mentioned that for Q1, we should be fairly in line with the growth pace that we've seen for fiscal year 21 for both Semiconductor and Infrastructure Software. So mid-teens, upper high teens for Semiconductor and middle single digits for the Infrastructure Software. Just turning back here quickly to the history of Broadcom, what we see is that this is actually the merger and acquisition of several companies. But just to highlight here that over the last few years, the company has been growing mostly in Infrastructure Software. So if you look at the bottom of the page, the company has actually acquired Brocade, CA Technologies, and Symantec in consecutive years, spending $6 billion for Brocade, $18.8 billion for CA Technologies, and lastly for Symantec, the company spent $10.7 billion. So as we can see, the company has diversified and has gone from a pure semiconductor play into an integrated semiconductor and software company. So those 3 consecutive acquisitions actually had an impact on the debt of Broadcom. Here is a picture of Broadcom over the last 5 fiscal years. What we see is that after the software company's acquisition, net debt stood at 33 billion at the end of fiscal year 20. But during fiscal year 21, actually, we had end of the year record cash with almost 12 billion, and the net debt was actually reduced to 28 billion. So very positive development during fiscal year 21. So as it's usual, Broadcom, together with the fiscal year end, announced the new dividend, and we had a 14% dividend hike. The dividend now per quarter stands at $4.10, which is roughly a dividend yield of 2.5%. What we typically have as well around this time is news of new acquisitions and how the company is going to deploy its capital. So as we've seen, we had record cash on the balance sheet, but the company probably did not see any good acquisition targets, as most of the semiconductor and software companies were also having their valuations quite high. So the company has actually decided to return cash in the form of share buybacks. So the company announced a new program of 10 billion share buybacks, which interestingly enough is only valid for the next year. So the authorization will actually be effective until the end of 2022. And this probably means that between dividend and share buybacks, the company will return the full free cash flow that it will generate to shareholders. So maybe one final comment on the sustainability of this dividend. What we see is that the company has been growing at a fast pace free cash flow. What we see is that for fiscal year 17, it was 5.5 billion USD, and for the last fiscal year 21, we had 13.3 billion. What we see is that the company has been rewarding shareholders with large dividend increases, as we've seen all of them more than double digits over the last 5 years, and actually faster than the free cash flow growth. So what we see now is that the company is returning roughly 46-47% of their free cash flow in the form of dividend, and the rest is going either to buybacks or acquisitions. So the company has been very deliberate and with a very consistent policy here. I hope you have enjoyed this. Give us a like, follow us both here on YouTube or on Twitter, and see you next time. Thank you.